So I never really made this kind of content before, but I kind of feel inspired to try it out this year. I don't know how long I'll stick to it, but let's do a January reading wrap up. Is it already a little bit late? Sure, but that's the only way I do things, so let's get started. Hi everyone, I'm Natalie. I talk manga, anime, and bookish things here. So let's get started on this January wrap up because I did read several things. So the first novel I read in 2025 was Bury Your Gaze by Tingle, which I got this signed copy thanks to my lovely friend Steph over at Coffee Over Apples. And so this novel, I gave it 4 stars if I remember correctly. I liked it. I overall really enjoyed what Chuck Tingle was doing here. I've read his chaotic work for a couple years now, and I finally tried one of his more traditional novels that's not as deranged, and I really liked it because this horror novel explores the concept of like Hollywood and queer stories in Hollywood and how they are kind of pigeonholed into specific things that can be done or should be done. And it discusses how the horror film genre as well is not seen as worthy of awards as frequently. And it's kind of doing the intersection between both things about how media needs diversity in more than one way and should be allowed to be complex and messy and have a variety of characters and their experiences, and how capitalism makes it so that what we're actually seeing is a deterioration of this, of thinking that because you found a formula that works really well and makes you a lot of money, that's what you should just do over and over again, when that actually is detrimental to media. So again, I really enjoyed this. The next 2 books I'm going to talk about together because they're part of a series, and that is Oliver and Alexander by Karla Nikole. These are part of the Vampires of Eden series, and I am a longtime fan now of Karla Nikole, and I'm so glad I finally got around to reading these 2 novels because I really did end up enjoying them. I gave Oliver 4 stars. In this one, we follow, the titular main character, Oliver, who has been raised in a very oppressive household where all his actions and everything he can do, go, say, is very controlled by one of his fathers. And so he has this arranged marriage actually to Alexander. And so the planning of that is happening when he ends up really falling for the designer of his wedding attire. And so it's kind of this little forbidden secret romance between Oliver and, what was this man's name again? Aries, I think it was. And so I really enjoyed this, even though it has a trope that I'm usually not super into, which is an age gap romance. It's a significant age gap between the characters. I was mostly okay with it because they're both vampires and they're both gonna live a really long time. And I'm like, it's fine. It's whatever. But I must admit that by the end of this novel, I truly could not comprehend why the girlies liked Alexander. I felt like Alexander walked all over Oliver and his feelings and didn't really take into consideration what Oliver wanted, which is a large part of why there were problems in their relationship. But it does get contextualized in Alexander's own novel. But again, genuinely, I don't know how the girlies who read this beginning to end and Alexander's novel hadn't come out yet were like, I love him, I adore him. I'm like, he's completely out of pocket. He's completely out of pocket. I'm fascinated, so I want to know more. I am interested to learn more, but I didn't love him in this novel at all. So then I picked up Alexander, which is a chonker, which, if you know me at all, you know I have a vendetta against novels, especially romance novels, particularly, that are over 350 pages long. I find it completely unnecessary. Easily 95% of the time, I'm like, you could have done and said all that in less pages. You did not need so many pages to get your point across. But Alexander broke the mold a little bit for me. But it's, again, particular to me. I'm a very character-driven reader, and so if you can get me invested in the characters of a novel, you could write to me that they're walking to the grocery store and I'll be riveted. I don't care what's going on. If I'm invested, I want to read every single thing. And so that's exactly what happened in here. I felt like because Alexander had so much stuff to work through because of the dumpster fire that was his relationship with Oliver, getting to see him and the fallout of that, and also rediscovering his feelings for someone that he met in his past was beautiful, amazing, incredible. I give it 4.5 stars. Absolutely adored it. I honestly felt once I picked up Oliver and Alexander, like, why was I wasting my time not doing this immediately when they were released? This is ridiculous, because I was keeping myself from happiness, but I fixed it. We're all good now. And now I'm anxiously waiting for book 3, which is going to follow Thomas, who is one of Oliver's brothers. I said one of as if he has others. Oliver has one brother and I believe one sister, so neither here nor there. It's going to be about Thomas. Then I read, and actually read twice, my first 5-star book of the year, which is Walking Practice. Walking Practice was impeccable. Again, I read it twice in the same month. I read this in January twice. To be fair, it's a novella. It's short. It's easy to read more than once in a month. But still, I read it. I made that conscious choice to read it more than once because I absolutely adored Mumu. In Walking Practice, we follow this alien called Mumu who is stuck on Earth, and they have learned that the only way that they can, gain nutrition is by eating human beings, because again, since they're stuck, they cannot go back to their home planet. They have to find a way to nourish themselves. So we're literally following this alien as they're going on the prowl, and having copious amounts of, sexual interactions with human beings before they make them their next meal. And Mumu is so fucking hilarious. I, again, adored Walking Practice. There's a reason why it was my first 5-star of the year, and I read it twice, because it was so good, so easy to read, so engaging, and ultimately had so many conversations and things to say about gender expression, what it's like to live in the world as visibly different. Amazing. I would highly recommend it. Then I read The Truth According to Ember, and I feel so incredibly guilty giving this book 2 stars, considering there's basically no traditionally published Indigenous romance in the market right now, but this got on my nerves. And there's a few reasons why it got on my nerves, because the title of this book is indicative of its content. We are following Ember, who, twists reality. She says what is convenient for her. And so we're following along her life as she is lying about stuff that is unnecessary to lie about. Like, I cannot help but describe Ember as a compulsive liar, because she's genuinely lying about things that she doesn't need to lie about, where the evidence is right there in front of the other people to see. Like, there's one point where Danica, right? She's in Danawa's house and she wakes up and she's incredibly allergic to cats. And so she wakes up clearly having an allergic reaction. And he's like, it looks like you're allergic to cats. Are you okay? And she's like, no, I'm not allergic to cats. This is fine. I love cats. Which, going into the cat thing, I'm sorry, but as someone who has 2 cats and is allergic to cats, I find it deeply offensive to read about a character who's like, I hate cats and they're evil and I'm allergic to them. I'm like, you don't have to hate cats. I feel like primarily because you're allergic to them. Like, that bizarre, but okay, a choice. Anyway, like, ultimately, a lot of this novel, actually, I was mostly kind of enjoying it. eventually got sick and tired of Ember and her nonsense, because Danawa was an angel, basically a saint in comparison to Ember. And so as the novel progressed, I was just left like, why does Danawa have any interest in this woman at all? At all, because we're not really shown Danawa's flaws, which I think is part of the dilemma of this novel. If Danawa had been as complex as Ember and as flawed, or again, have some flaws, it would have made the story more engaging and bearable. But because he was perfect, I was literally like, bro, date someone else. There's other indigenous women out there you could date who are not this level of mess. Choose better. Choose better. Ultimately, though, I will be giving this author another chance, because I do feel like there was something here. There was potential here. It was ultimately, I could not fuck with Ember, especially as someone who hates lying and liars. I simply could not fuck with her. And so I feel like potentially with different characters, different conflict and all that, I really could enjoy this author's writing, but this novel just wasn't it. The last novel I read in January, before I go into the manga that I read in January, was Stolen Chances. So as the chaos gremlin that I am, and also as someone who understands the romance genre, I absolutely read Stolen Chances without reading the first novel in this series, which is, I don't even know what it's called, because frankly, I only gave it a chance because it's Clio Evans, because I'm not really a cowboy girly. I'm not really in a, let's read about a small town romance with cowboys. I'm like, I don't really touch that, with a 7-foot pole at all. But because it was Clio Evans, and I'm absolutely always ravenous for a polyamorous relationship, I was like, let me give this one a chance, because we are following a polyamorous relationship and it's Clio Evans. So probably if I'm going to enjoy all these things together, it's going to happen with a Clio Evans novel. And so I did, and I did love it. I gave it 4 stars. Though it did end up being way too long. And again, was like 400 pages long, unnecessarily long for the story this was trying to tell. I absolutely did not have the same thing I had with Alexander, where Alexander was insanely long. It's longer than even 400 pages, but I enjoyed every single page and I would not cut any of the pages. With Stolen Chances, I was like, we needed to trim the fat of this, because we did not need all this page count. It felt like while I was reading it, the main conflict just kept being postponed, and we're pushing it further and pushing it further, and other things happen, and then it mellows out a little bit, and then another big thing happens. I'm like, can we cut to the chase? Because I feel like at this point you're just pushing around the issue when we could just resolve it already. So that was my only complaint about Stolen Chances, was the length of it. It's the only reason why I didn't get 5 stars and only got 4 stars. Otherwise, I loved Sarah, Sam, and Colt. They were incredible. They were so freaking cute. I adored them. I adored them because every single character had their own character arc to go through, something they needed to learn and grow, and they did that together. And absolutely impeccable, incredible, amazing. So again, loved it. I have no regrets. And I probably will be reading the 3rd book in this series. I think it's a trilogy. Don't quote me on that though. The way I didn't even insinuate what Stolen Chances was about, except for saying that drama happened and it's polyamorous. So basically, Sarah has recently gotten divorced because her husband was abusive, and they also found out he had an evil twin brother, very telenovela, that was, women in their town. I think it was in their town, whatever. And so there's a huge fallout. And so she's now reconnecting with a kind of high school crush, basically, and building this new relationship. And there's like sparks with this other man called Sam. And so eventually the 3 of them are in love, while at the same time there are threats that keep happening to Sarah's life, which are connected to the of women that happen. And so that's all escalating. And I just felt like it was escalating for too long and we needed to just put an end to it and find out who was the culprit responsible for what was happening in Sarah's life. That was so horrible. Yeah, that was pretty much it. Now, as for the manga that I read in January, technically the first thing I read in the year was the guy she was interested in wasn't a guy at all. I absolutely adored this Yuri manga. It was so freaking cute. It was adorable. And I love like the color gradient here, like the fact that it's just the neon green. Impeccable, amazing, adore it. I gave it 4 stars. The title basically says it all. Like, the two of them kind of start developing feelings for each other when she has no idea that this is one of her classmates and is in fact a girl and not a guy, not just the cute guy that works at the record store that she likes to go to. And so they're both kind of at this thing where she is more clearly an outsider, but she kind of can be considered one of the popular girls, but she secretly has this interest that's very niche considering that they're in Japan. And so the type of music that she's really into is not what's really popular there. And so they kind of start bonding over their mutual interests in the same music. And so it's freaking adorable and super cute. And I cannot wait to continue reading this series because the two of them give me life. Then I read volume 2 of Perfect Buddy. This is just chaos, gremlin energy, office romance shenanigans. It's absolutely deranged. If I remember correctly, in this one, they're doing like a company retreat. And so again, chaos ensues. There's a lot of tension between the two of them because he cannot stand how cheery and in everyone's face this guy always is. But of course, there's an attraction there. And so dumbass shit happens. Like when I say dumbass shit happens, it's dumbass shit. That's what I like about the series. It's ridiculous. It's silly, and I have a lot of fun reading it. So I'm looking forward to volume 3. Finally, we have volume 5 of Fire in His Fingertips. This is a series that I nearly gave up on. I nearly gave up on this series because the love interest is so deranged and unhinged that oftentimes I'm like, I cannot stand you, sir. Actually, you are terrible. And the main reason I stuck it out is because he's gotten better. He isn't quite as deranged and unhinged as he was in the beginning of the series, but ultimately, I have a lot of complicated feelings about this series. I gave this specific volume 3.5 stars because, again, ultimately, I never fully love the volumes in this series. And inherently, I can't because it has the whole dynamic of like, she's so delicate and sweet and innocent. And he's always like, let's do it in fucking wherever the fuck I want. We're in public. I don't give a shit. We're doing it here. And it's always her being like, oh no, don't do that. While also she's incredibly turned on. It's dumb. In conclusion, it's dumb. And I keep going because I'm like, well, it's not as bad as it used to be. We've had development. We are progressing an actual narrative. So, okay, let's just continue. But it is silly shenanigans since part of the dynamic as well is like he's a fireman and you know, all firemen are just like horn dogs or whatever. Dumb. In conclusion, dumb. So yeah, that's everything I read in January. I also started Defectors in January, which is a nonfiction about how the Latino community has progressively turned to the far right and how that came to be, but I haven't finished it still. So that I'll probably talk about in more detail in my February wrap up. So keep an eye out for that.